Along with extra time and lower instances of unpredictable weather, there are a variety of benefits that come with fall ESN application. Learn more at smartnitrogen.com.
I'm Lindsay Smith with Real Agriculture and Real Ag Radio, and joining me now is Dr. Leigh Rosengren. She's the Chief Veterinary Officer with the Canadian Cattle Association. Welcome here, Leigh.
Thank you, Lindsay. Pleasure to be here.
All right. So, in digging into, we have a bill right now in the House of Commons, Bill C-293, and broadly speaking, this is Canada's pandemic response or future pandemic response, but held within the bill are significant points that could have an impact on Canada's livestock industries, specifically when it comes to the use potentially of antimicrobials. I want to start, let's just back up one step. People are pretty familiar with antibiotics. What is antimicrobials? What does that actually mean?
Well, in general lingo, they are interchangeable terms. Antimicrobials are any drug that we use to kill microbes. And really, when we're talking about the concern about antibiotic resistance, we're talking about bacteria that have become resistant to the antibiotics that are typically used to treat or prevent an infection.
Okay. So in this bill, there is language that talks about our livestock systems having potentially an impact on a pandemic response or perhaps a pandemic happening. I want to explore from the perspective of the science, from the perspective of what the cattle industry has already been taking on as far as managing and avoiding antimicrobial resistance. Is this science-based where this bill is sort of trying to take us? Is that does all of this add up as far as how the language portrays it?
Well, I think you've really hit the nail on the head. This is a wide-ranging bill, and it's a bill that we're just not clear on what direction it's going to go, and there is some concerning language. I heard it explained to me early in my career that if you think you understand antimicrobial resistance, you haven't had it explained to you properly. This is an incredibly complex scientific topic. First of all, we need listeners to be clear that all antimicrobial use selects for resistance. That's natural biological selection. But we still need to use antimicrobials both in human medicine and in veterinary medicine to protect the health and welfare of animals. So it's the nuances that are concerning, not necessarily the overall connection between agriculture and antimicrobial resistance.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's one thing. I'm a livestock producer as well. We've had recent rule changes over the past little while within, how livestock producers access antimicrobials, the importance of having a vet-client relationship. What is the industry already doing in this space of antimicrobial resistance?
Well, I think we need to look at the industry specifically, but we also need to look in Canada in the global context. So you're right, we had regulatory changes back in 2018 that moved all medically important antimicrobials to prescription only. That was an incredibly important step for Canada to take to ensure that when antibiotics are used in livestock, they're used judiciously and under good stewardship. So at this point, as you know, every cattle producer in Canada has a veterinary client-patient relationship, and the antibiotics or antimicrobials that they're using are done so under veterinary prescription. That's for all livestock species. The other thing we need to think about Canada in terms of that global context, at the same time, they took the step to formalize that medically important antimicrobials were no longer used for growth promotion purposes. And we hadn't been doing that for decades in our country, but it was now formalized on the labels. That's really important. Not all countries globally have done that. So consumers can rest assured that that's where the industry's at. So those are some of the things we're doing. The other thing we do, Lindsay, is we lean into cattle health and wellness. And so we tend to think about minimizing antimicrobial use, but the phrase that I really like to use is as little as possible, but as much as necessary. And so where we really lean in is making sure it's as little as possible, doing proper vaccination programs, using proper biosecurity, using proper systems to keep our cattle healthy so that we can minimize the amount of use that we need. I think those are really important pieces to get out there when we're talking about antimicrobial use, which then, of course, is tied to the issue of resistance.
Mm-hmm. Now, this bill as written, it does have sort of very specific language as to promoting plant-based protein,
Mhm.
etc. What, in your mind, from how we manage these things, how important is it that we have, scientific language that, of course, leaves it open to be able to manage our livestock sectors should the government feel they need to, but is really in line with what is necessary to keep our livestock healthy?
Right. So again, going back to how we use antimicrobials, I talked about that. But one of the other things Canadians might not be aware of is the existence that we have surveillance in Canada that follows both farm gate antimicrobial use, but resistance in bacteria that are potentially foodborne right from the farm through the slaughter process, through retail, and then is actually linked to food net, which is humans. So consumers can be assured that this is being monitored by the Public Health Agency of Canada, which then provides us that scientific evidence to build our programs and policies on. It's a
So that
space that both the government and the industry have been very proactive in. I don't want to make it sound like we're reacting to bills like this. We've been doing this for decades.
And to that point, this bill, of course, is not brand new, and certainly there have been submissions from several of the industry groups who have been following this closely and have been a part of this process, even as it moves through Parliament. So certainly, it's true. It's not that this is, a surprise per se, but certainly I think many industry groups are speaking out against the language as it is, as it moves its way through
Mhm.
Parliament. From CCA's perspective, what would you like to see in a bill that is, yes, it's very broad, but from the animal health perspective, what would you prefer to see in a bill such as this?
I think what we absolutely need recognized is that the threat of antimicrobial resistance is real. It is a real public health threat, but it needs to be addressed through a One Health lens. We need to recognize that the problems and the solutions both lie in that triad of considering the environment, agriculture, and humans, and that we cannot properly solve this by trying to address one sector alone. It has to be through that One Health lens, and it has to be science-based, to go back to my first point, because it is so very complex.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. Rosengren, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate your time.